Should be good.
Should be good. Okay. This is our very first episode broadcasting live on Twitch. So, welcome everybody. My name is Daniel Unmanageable. This is Hard Knocks Talks. I would like to say thank you to my sponsors, the Prairie Node of the Canadian Research Initiative in Substance Misuse and Prairie Sky Recovery Center here in Saskatchewan. Tonight's guest, Robbie Seale, the creator of the Fasd Family Life podcast, is with us, and we are going to talk to her about her journey through parenting 4 adopted children with FASD and how she is using her experience to help others, and we're going to meet her right after this. Right after that. There we go. Deadly. What? Oh, sorry.
I spent 23 years living in addiction. 16 of those years, I worked as a Red Seal tradesperson in Saskatchewan and Northern Alberta. During that time, I made many mistakes and took more than a few hard knocks. I went from tradesman to business owner to hiding from gang members and dumpster diving. But with that lived experience, I've decided to try and make a change. I've dedicated my life to raising awareness and promoting change in the fields of substance use and psychological health and safety. So join me and my guests as we take off the blinders around mental health in our communities and at work and shine a light on what's working and what's not working in the fields of mental health and occupational health and safety. I'm Daniel Unmanageable, and I'll be your host, and this is Hard Knocks Talks.
Okay. I hope you're ready, Robbie, because we're coming for you. Let's bring her in. What's up, Robbie?
Hi, everybody. Hi, Daniel. I'm so happy to be here. How are you?
Oh, my gosh. We're doing good.
Hey, breathe.
Yeah.
Breathe. We're going to be
Tell
great.
me. You're going to have to teach me some techniques here because, oh, my gosh. Well, when Robbie came in tonight, she came into a well, basically a shit show. So, but
it was chaos.
Yeah, it was. There was a lot of unsavory words being said, but we're all adults here. So, anyways, are you ready to go into the flashback?
Let's do it.
Let's go. Okay. So, why don't you tell us a little bit about why you decided to get into adoption all those years ago?
Yeah, sure. I was a young, naive, idealistic 19-year-old, and I was downtown. So I live in Edmonton, Alberta, Canada. Hi, everybody. And I was downtown for an event, and my friend was touring me around in downtown, and I saw something that changed my life. And what I saw was, we went down a back alley, and I saw 9 and 10-year-old girls prostituting. And I grew up in a nice, safe middle-class family, and working class family, and I'd never seen anything like that before. I had no idea that existed. And that seeing those children, I could still see them in my mind's eye, seeing those children changed the trajectory of my life. And in that moment, I changed my career path. I was going to be a travel agent. I became a child and youth care worker. I changed my college, working with children at risk. And ultimately, I decided I would build my family through foster care or adoption.
Wow. So, and when you decided to adopt, you actually had a biological child too.
Yeah, I did.
How was that? How did that work in the family dynamic? How old was she when you adopted?
Yeah. So it was always our plan. So I got married young, got married right out of college, and it was always our plan that we would build our family through adoption, but had a surprise pregnancy like many women do. After I was married, I had a surprise pregnancy. And so I did have one biological daughter, and we still we still plan to build our family through adoption. So when my daughter was about 6 years old, that's when we activated that plan. And she knew about that she wanted a sibling. In fact, she wanted a twin sister. So I'm like, well, we'll see what we can do about that. But we ended up going through the classes to foster or adopt. And at that time, Edmonton had a program called Foster to Adopt. And that's where you would take on the role as a foster parent with the hope of adopting that child, but also being able to go the other way and help that child reconcile to their birth family, depending on what would happen. So, and the idea there was that the parents would take the instability on and the child would have stability. So they wouldn't feel that rockiness of their legal situation. You would wear that for them and you would give them stability. And that was in line with what my values were. So that's what we did. And the girl who came to us, my own daughter at that time was 7 years old. The girl who came to us at that time was 3 years old, and we did end up adopting her a couple of years down the road. So, yeah, we went from a family with one child who was 7, and now we had a 3-year-old girl as well.
Mm-hmm. And did you know where your adopted child came from?
I sure did. Yeah, I did.
Yeah.
My daughter who came to me, she'd been in and out of care since she was just a few weeks old. Fourth child born to a woman who had an unstable situation, who was using drugs and alcohol herself, had a history of family violence. There was a history of abuse and neglect within the family home. Even birth mom had a history in child welfare herself. So this was one of these generational stories that we so often see with children who are in care. Yeah. So I knew that of my daughter, yeah.
So when you took on this child, was it what you thought it was going to be? Like, were you, because you said you'd had some training already by the time you went in. Did that prepare you?
Not really. No, not really. I mean, yes, I was a child and youth care worker, and we spent maybe one afternoon in that class talking about FASD, and we didn't get a good understanding of it at all. We just understood that there was memory gaps and that sometimes children with FASD have trouble with math, and that's all we learned. And FASD is so much more complicated than that. And when I was in college, we didn't talk about the implications of trauma and how that can affect childhood development and childhood behavior as well, and a child's ability to attach to you as a caregiver. That wasn't covered. So a lot of it was there was some coverage of it, some discussion of it in our classes preparing to be foster parents, and that was helpful. But oftentimes foster parents and adoptive parents go into these things. They hear what the social workers have said, but they think, it won't apply to me. I'm here.
Yeah.
It won't apply to me. And, my love will surmount all of these, my love will overcome all of these adversities, and we will just clear a whole new path for this child. And so that's I went in pretty idealistic, I would say.
Yeah. So, what kind of problems were you seeing in school?
She came as a 3-year-old, and the first things I saw were really great behavior. But I noticed that she wouldn't show any math. She wouldn't practice things like young children usually practice some pre-numeracy, so early math skills or early language skills, even reciting their ABCs. And I noticed that she wouldn't do that unless she had it perfected. So I don't know exactly what that was about. I also noticed that a year after she was with us, she regressed back to infancy, and that's a trauma situation. That's from not having her basic needs met. So what I mean by that, Daniel, was it was quite surprising, but she went back to being pre-verbal, requiring a bottle, requiring being held like an infant. She went right back to getting those basic needs met that hadn't been met as a baby. And that was pretty surprising. And fortunately, I had a friend who was also a foster parent who coached me through that. So I just swaddled my daughter up and gave her a bottle and went back to potty training. Even though she had been thoroughly trained, we just had to start all over again.
Okay.
Yeah. And then when she got into school, elementary school, she seemed to do okay there. Mathematically, she did fine. She was able to read. In fact, she was kind of navigating her way through quite an academic program. She did quite well. But it was when she was she was in 3rd grade, that's when the teacher at a parent-teacher interview made a comment about her being a problem. And I knew she wasn't a problem. This is my easy child. She wasn't a problem. And what I was getting the vibe of, this was a racism issue. My daughter's Indigenous, and there were not other Indigenous kids at this school. It was a very multicultural school. A lot of children from all kinds of different nations, but not Indigenous children. This really felt to me like this was racism. And so I thought, hell no, this isn't going to happen. I'm protecting my daughter from this. So I brought my daughter home to do homeschooling. So for grade 4, 5, 6, we homeschooled. And I also wanted to do that to build her attachment because, again, she came as a 3-year-old. And so when she was 8 years old, 9 years old, I wanted her home so we could build on attachment and secure her before she hit her adolescence.
Yeah. So the chaos continues, as you can see.
I see that. Yeah.
We're just gonna roll with it, and if we have to go to just me full screen to you full screen, that's what we're gonna do. So, anyways, we'll just carry on. So what kind of things did the school system do to help you?
Well, that school system didn't do anything to help me. That's why I went to homeschooling. Right. But, after homeschooling for a few years, that's when we decided we were going to adopt again. And so life just got more complicated. Danielle said to us, this was my adopted daughter, said to us, Mommy, can we adopt again? Can we adopt so we can help more kids like me? And I kind of thought we were done. We had 2 kids. They were, about 12 and 9 years old. And I thought that's pretty good. Let's leave it there. But she wanted to adopt again. And so that started a conversation within the family. Certainly she didn't make that decision, but it started a conversation. And, we considered it and we thought about adoption and we looked, there's a website you can look at, who's needing to be placed in adoptive homes. And we saw a sibling group. And so we had a conversation about adopting a sibling group. And that's what our family, my husband and I, former husband and I, decided to do, to adopt a sibling group. And as it turned out, we ended up adopting infant twins. They were 5 months old, twin girls. And their mother also had a substance use problem. And at that time, she was on the streets and she was a poly substance user, including alcohol, struggling with homelessness and all those issues. But when the girls came to us, it was through an open adoption. They had been cared for by their maternal grandmother. So they had family contact. So that was a different kind of navigation for us to now, how do we stretch our family and integrate this birth family with ours? And it's been a beautiful experience. And then as time moved on, I was still homeschooling Danielle. Like I said, grade 4, 5, 6, when Danielle was in grade 6. And so my elder daughter was in grade 10. Then the girls, the twins, their mother had another baby. In fact, she had a little boy. And so we ended up deciding to adopt that little boy. And he has a lot of challenges because of prenatal exposure to alcohol and drugs. And so over the years, we've seen many challenges, primarily behaviorally with our kids. And certainly they have also demonstrated learning disabilities and behavioral challenges that are very common with children with fetal alcohol spectrum disorder.
Yeah. So while all this is happening, how did you cope? Like, what were some of the things that you did for yourself while all this was going on?
I mean, the only thing I could do for myself was just try to make sure all my kids' needs were met. I mean, Danielle, it was a busy time. My husband at that time was working shift work. He was in law enforcement. He was working shift work. So I'm a wife and a mom holding down the fort with a husband who's working shifts. I've got a child who, my eldest was elementary school, then junior high when we adopted the twins, and then high school when we adopted the baby. And so we just kept multiplying the dimensions of our family. So really, I was just trying to keep my head above water. And I think I survived mostly by keeping a really organized home. I was like super mom. I could do anything. Mm-hmm. But, that only lasted so long. You burn the candle at both ends, and at some point you burn out. And yeah, it was hard. And at that time, I wasn't learning about FASD. I knew about the risk, and I was looking for markers of it, but I wasn't seeing it in Danielle. I was questioning the twins. They were reaching their developmental milestones right on time. Yeah. And then when we adopted the baby, he was very sickly. And so all of a sudden it was just chaos, and it was just the world's on fire. And it was just trying to keep this baby alive. He was in the NICU for a few weeks before he came home. A few weeks later, he started aspirating and turning blue, and rushed him to the hospital. And then that spent a whole year of me rushing back and forth to the hospital, and the kids kind of picking up the slack. So it was pretty chaotic.
Yeah, no kidding. And then in the midst of all of this, you experienced a divorce.
Yeah. That was a good time.
That was something.
That was 20 years. I was married for 20 years. And it was a really toxic relationship. It was an abusive relationship. It was from the beginning, and it just carried on. But lots of women are in those situations, and they try to stay and hope it'll get better, and their love will fix everything. And that's a load of shit. That doesn't work. People have to, and this from recovery. Like, you got to fix yourself. Nobody can fix you. Like, your mom can't fix you, your girlfriend can't fix you, your wife can't fix you. Whatever it is. Reverse the roles. So anyway, in beginning of February of 2010, I ended the marriage, and here I was, not working, mom of 5 kids, 4 of whom are adopted, and now what? And so that was really tragic, and that was really painful, but it was the best move. I had to protect myself and my children from that toxic situation. Yeah. And that was really good. My older children, who were then in junior high and high school, those older two, affirmed, it wasn't their decision to make, but affirmed that decision, On we go. Everybody's doing well in school. So this was February. We're moved through the summer. Everything seems to be fine. My eldest goes away to work. Is that where she was at that time? I don't even remember. No, she was away. She was already working away. And then it was late September, when we realized Danielle wasn't home one morning. Mm-hmm. And that's when life fell apart. Danielle wasn't home one morning at 6:00 in the morning, and my eldest, I guess, was there, and she said, Mom, come in. Mom, I think something's wrong. And I went downstairs to her basement room, unlocked it, went in, and there was no kid here. And I phoned the RCMP. I lived in a small town, so I phoned the RCMP and said, my daughter's missing. She's only 14. She's never done this before. And, as they're trying to figure out whether or not they're going to help me, because, this is what they think is just a typical childhood behavior. They're not necessarily getting involved. And as we're processing that, I hear her come into her bedroom. So somehow she got in through that basement bedroom window and came in, and she came out to where I was standing. We began to talk, and she leaned on the wall, Daniel, and she's just kind of slouched down the wall. And I'm like, oh my gosh, you're drunk. Like, what happened? And she told me what had happened, and she'd gone to Leduc, gone partying in Leduc, which means she's been in a car with somebody, and I don't know who. Later I find out that my 14-year-old daughter is drinking with men that are 20, 21 years old, partying all night and coming home. Mm-hmm. And Daniel was in a couple of days later that, and I had no idea. That, like I said, this was my easy kid. There was no indicators that this was happening. She had great marks in school. She had 2 solid friends. She was cooperative at home. Like, there was no signs of this. And it was just a matter of a couple of days later, I think 4 days, quite literally 4 days later, when we had the family together for a supper to celebrate. My oldest was going to go away to Hawaii to do some study for 6 months. And so everybody was there. And that evening after supper, Danielle just said to me, hey, I'm going now. I'm just taking out the cat litter, Mom. And I'm sitting here talking to my parents, and my kids are around. And I'm like, okay, thanks, honey. She goes out, and Danielle, she never came back. Mm-hmm. And that's when my world fell apart. That's when my world fell apart. She was 14. She was my easy kid, and she was gone. And I phoned the RCMP again, and you got to look for her. And then I left. I just said, Mom and Dad, can you hold down the fort? Because I've got 3 little kids here. And they did. And I jumped in my mommy minivan, and I was tearing up and down the streets of our little town. And I was driving. I drove up over the grass, right up to the high school, right up to where all the kids hang out and smoke dope. I pulled up right up to them, and they're like, oh my God, like Karen has showed up, right? And I'm like, guys, my daughter's missing. Do you guys know Danielle? Do you know where she is? And of course they did. They just play dumb, but they were pretty shocked that this mom did that. And Danielle, it was pretty crazy. I think we'll get into the story later, but it wasn't for a few days till the RCMP found her.
Yeah. We've got some people chiming in here. I just want to say hello. So we've got Natalie. Natalie's watching
That's
tonight.
That's my friend. Hey,
yes,
Natalie.
Yes, I see
Thanks
Natalie.
For being here.
I see Natalie on LinkedIn all the time. Hi, Natalie. Yeah. Thank you for the comment. Yeah. We've got Kim F here.
Hi, Kim. Yes, that's my friend. Hey, Kim. Nice to be here. I'm glad you're here.
We've got MDC.
Hello, MDC. I don't know who you are, but I'm glad you're here.
Yeah. Well, the next one here.
Hey, there you are. Hey, hi.
Yeah. No, he said Aileen.
Aileen. Yeah. I know who that is. That's one of my besties. She's in my mom group. I always talk about my mom group on my podcast.
Oh yeah.
That's my bestie. That's one of my besties in my mom group.
Yeah. He's chiming in. He said that has to be so stressful. So, yeah. So you ended up going to court. Now tell us about a PCHAD. What's a PCHAD?
Whew. Well, up until the moment, I didn't even know what a PCHAD was either. But a PCHAD is a protection order. I just have to remember what the words are, but it's a protection order for children or youth abusing alcohol. So that's what it's for. And so I went to court. I had to stand before a Court of Queen's Bench justice and make the case that my daughter was at risk because she was using and abusing alcohol. And anybody who's ever had a teenager can say, yeah, teenagers do that stuff. Like, that, what's the panic here? So I really had to make the case that my child was at risk. And so I explained that she had prenatal alcohol exposure. I explained that she had been in foster care, that she'd been adopted. She's only 14, and that she is drinking with men, grown ass men, and she is at risk. And thank God that judge granted the PCHAD order. And what that meant, and I went down then to the justice signed it. And then I went down to the clerk's office, and then I retrieved it. And then I drove all the way back to Beaumont myself, and I handed it to the RCMP. Like, here's the PCHAD order. Please help me find my kid. Because, if your kid knows their address and knows how to tie their shoe and knows your phone number, they're not going to go looking. They're like, this is just a kid doing a kid thing. And I'm like, no, she's at risk. Handed them the PCHAD order. Go find her. So it had to be Mama. And so what I did is I started looking around town, and I grabbed her school.
They didn't go and find her? What did they do when they saw the order?
Okay, thanks. Okay, thanks.
Okay.
So, at some point, we'll take it under advisement. At some point, something's going to happen. But, when you're, as a parent, when your kid is missing and they're using drugs and alcohol and that they're vulnerable, like, look how fast I'm talking. I'm so agitated because my adrenaline is flying. And, as a mom, I know that her birth mother lived in addiction. I know her father struggled with addiction. I know that she's been in trauma. I knew that if she ever drank alcohol, it would rob her. She would be addicted, right? So I am thinking about my kid, as though she's walking on the railroad tracks down a tunnel and the train's coming at her. And she's only 14, so she does not understand the implications of what she's doing. So I was desperate to find her. So Danielle, I had her picture in my hand, and I like her school picture, and I'd go up to all the little businesses in that little town we lived in, and I'd show them the picture and said, this is my kid, she's missing. Can you help me find her? Or how can you help me, is what I said. Because as soon as I said, this is my kid, she's missing, they were like, oh, that's too bad. But when I said, this is my child, this is my daughter, and she's missing, how can you help me? Then they would be like, oh yeah, like the donair shop. Yeah, I saw her in here yesterday. She bought French fries. She was with some friends. So, I started doing that. I went all around the town. I went into people's houses, like those kind of sketchy houses that you're kind of wondering like what goes on behind there. I would like go up to the door and see if anybody's there. Hello, nobody's in. I just let myself in. Like, I freaking went into people's houses going, Danielle.
Super dangerous.
Yeah, but my kid is missing.
Fair enough.
Did I say, can you see my Superwoman cape? Can you see it flying? Like, I'm going to save my kid, right? Yeah, I'm just going anywhere.
Yeah.
Then what happened is I go to the high school and say, can I talk to my daughter's best friend? No, it's FOIP, so freedom of protection. You can't talk to her. Like, shit, if she walked to my house, I could talk to her, but I couldn't talk to her in the school. Yeah. So I'm like, okay, fine. But I'm not going to be deterred. So I just go to the cafeteria, and I sit there in the cafeteria, and there's a crowd of kids, like a small group of kids hanging out talking. Like, they're probably skipping class. I did that in high school too. Who doesn't do that? Yeah. So I'm sitting there, and they're talking shit. And so I sit there listening, and finally I catch one of their names, right? Because they're just talking back and forth. And I said, hey, Cody, come here. And he's like, what? Again, here's Karen, putting her nose in. But I'm like, hey, Cody, come here. And I showed him my picture again. I said, this is my daughter, Danielle, and she's missing. How can you help me? And she's like, he says, oh my God, I know her. That's Danielle. And she hangs around with this real badass. And he gave me the name, and he said, like, she's in trouble. And so you know what he did? He gave me the phone number of 2 of the drug dealers in town. He said, call these guys. They'll know where she is. So here I am. I call up I'm sitting in the high school cafeteria, phoning up the drug dealers in Beaumont going, hey, I'm Danielle's mom. I'm really scared she's missing. How can you help me find her? And you know what? They helped me find her. The cops at that point, like, again, this was 3 days after the PCHAD order, right?
Right.
Oh, 2 days after the PCHAT order, and nothing's happening. And so the cops are cruising around, as they do, but they're in no hurry to find her.
Yeah.
But these drug dealers, these teenage drug dealers, knew where Danielle was. They found her. They walked her up this hill, because Beaumont's got all these hills, up this hill toward where the cops are cruising, and they just happened to kind of hand her off somehow to the cops. And then they disappeared in the wind, as drug dealers do. They disappeared in the wind, and here Danielle's apprehended. And then the drug dealers called me before the cops did. Go, yeah. So we had her, we brought her to the cops, and I'm like, thank you guys. And so I'm like, I'll meet you at the donair shop. I bought them donairs, and they were so happy. I'm like, I gave them hugs. Thank you guys. You guys helped me find my kid. I bought them donairs. I'm like, what do you guys want? What do you guys want? Can I have a Monster? Can I have fries? Yeah, right. So I bought them energy drinks and fries and donairs as a thank you for helping them find my kids. And
that is wild. That's wild.
Right? And here's this mom, right? Like,
yeah.
And you know what one of those kids said to me though? He had tears in his eyes. He goes, I wish my mom cared that much.
Oh man.
Broke my heart. And that's freaking why I adopted, right? Think back to those kids on the streets. And then that kid said, I wish my mom cared that much. That's why I went into adoption. But my kid is now apprehended. RCMP called me, Robbie, we have your kid. And I'm like, I try not to be cheeky, but yeah, like, I know.
Yeah, I know.
You're welcome is what I should have said. You're
and
welcome.
And if you want to buy some dope, I can probably hook you up with that too.
Yeah, probably. Yeah, because this time it was so funny, Daniel, because here I am. Like, honestly, I'm a church lady. Like, not that you could tell by my language right now, but like, I'm this church lady. I grew up in church. I grew up going to youth group and all this kind of stuff. And now suddenly in my phone, I've got the RCMP. I've got 2 drug dealers' phone numbers in my phone. I've got the crisis line. Like, what the hell happened in my life? But you know what? You got to do what you got to do.
Yeah, it's like a Seth Rogen movie.
Oh man. Oh man. It's crazy.
Yeah.
So then they call me down there, and I go to the office, and here's your daughter. And man, she looked like she'd been homeless but the thing is, like, I'm just seeing my precious kid. She's 14 years old, and she's wearing, her hair's all ragged. She's wearing this ragged shirt I've never seen before. It's dirty and it's too big and it's all ripped up. And
was she remorseful?
Danielle, what? No. She looked at me and she goes, yeah, like I was homeless. Like, but like, I can't even convey, like, it was like blank, but it was more than blank. It was like what struck me, Danielle, is that she really connected with that. She identified with being homeless. It's like she'd switched her identity from being part of our family to being homeless. Mm-hmm. And I knew then that, man, I don't know if I can reach her. Mm-hmm. And she's just 14, and she'd been so protected. You homeschooled her. She did horse riding lessons, piano lessons, loved and adored. She wants a cat, she gets a cat. She wants a dog, she gets a dog. Like, I mean, love this kid. And all of a sudden she has changed her attachments from family to peers, and from family to peers to homelessness.
Yeah.
And I said, Danielle, sweetheart, you don't need to be homeless. You could have come home anytime. She says, I did. I hopped the fence. We have a 6-foot fence all locked up and gated a lock so the dogs and little kids wouldn't run out. She said, I hopped the fence. I came up because I was hungry, and then I thought, nah, and I hopped back out.
Just like that.
She goes, just like that. And she goes, I fucking saw you driving all around town too. I saw you. I was in the bushes. I thought that was hilarious.
Oof.
My heart. But wow. She was watching it. It wasn't as cold as I'm making it sound. It felt cold to me. But what it felt like at the time was like she was watching this movie. She was like detached, and right. She was just watching. That's what it was like. She was like watching, and maybe she's even just watching herself.
Somebody else's mom driving around.
Yeah.
Okay, so
and she was 14.
What happened then? Yeah, I mean, you scooped her up from the cop shop, and
No, I did not because they had an apprehension order. So their job at that point was to take her to a safe house for children abusing drugs and alcohol. So they take her to a safe house where she can detox for 5 days, and some addictions counselors can talk to her. And then if she's willing to, she can then go to a 10-day detox or a 10-day treatment center. What are you going to do in 10 days? But at least it's something. And you can detox for 5 days, and then you go to the treatment center for 10 days. And then if the child wants to, then the child can go to residential treatment. This is all through ADAC. But you know what? Right. What killed me, though, is like, what 14-year-old is capable of making those kinds of decisions.
Oh,
And the parent, and
Yeah.
they've taken all the parental authority away from the parent to say, my child needs this, or my child this, or like, if I took them to the doctor, I would make the decisions and I'd make the advocacy, right?
Yeah.
But now she's in the ADAC system. And I know, like, treatment's not going to work unless you want it, right? I get that too. Like, it's not going to work. But I couldn't even steer the ship. I couldn't even advocate at all. It was all up to a 14-year-old. And she's like, man, I don't want to go. And I don't want to be. I'm like, and I said to her, Danielle, in what world is it that a 14-year-old gets to determine the fate of a family?
Yeah. We have a woman. Oh, and I knew Angie was going to chime in. Let's see here.
Angie.
Yeah, here we go. Angie Hamilton, and she is a strong advocate for involuntary treatment for youth. And as soon as you started
about capacity,
as soon as you started talking about that, I thought of Angie right away.
Like what 14-year-old has the capacity, especially a 14-year-old who is now using alcohol and drugs, and she's caught up with older people, and she's got FASD potentially, so she's vulnerable. Does she have the capacity?
Mm-hmm. So
I agree.
So what happened? Did she sober up?
No. I mean, she did while she was in, and she did the 5-day, and then she did the 10-day, and she seemed to like it. And then all of a sudden I got a phone call from them saying she left. I'm like, what do you mean she left? She's 14. Yeah, she left with some older guy and a girl. And I'm like, well, who? Well, we don't know. Mm-hmm. Like, here's my 14-year-old. She's like, this is like, I mean, you're just gobsmacked. Like, what do you mean?
They just turned her loose, just like, see you later.
Yeah, because it's voluntary. So yeah. I could check her out. She could check herself out, but who the hell did she go with? And they didn't tell me. They didn't even know. And so fortunately, I knew who her two friends were, her good friends. So I phoned up one of them just to see. And it was her friend and her grandpa. You know, they just checked her out because her best friend lived with her grandfather. So I phoned up and I said, like, under what authority do you have to take my child at a treatment center? Like, what are you thinking here? I would never do that to your child. And here began the whirlwind of, you know, addiction and street life and treatment centers and family therapy. And, you know, long story short, we did a lot of therapy. And, you know, remember, I've got 4 other kids, but all my energy is focused on this one right now because it's all on fire, you know. And while this is happening, I moved. So as this was happening, while she was in the treatment center, like in all this back and forth, I ended up deciding I was going to move out of Beaumont. So I lived in the small, you know, satellite community. It's a nice little town. But I thought, no, I'm going to get her out of that high school and get her away from her friends. And, you know, hoping that I could put a pause in this. I could just change the trajectory just a little bit, like an opportunity. I didn't know if it would work, but I moved to Edmonton. So single mom. So I rented my house. I rented a house in Edmonton. And let me tell you, nobody wants to rent to a single mom with 5 kids. Talk about stigma. Nobody wants that woman renting their house. You know, finally, I got a place to rent.
But you look like you're from church, though, so like that doesn't count for anything.
But I'm on the phone. No, so you know, and you know, how many children do you have? 5. Single mom, 5 children. No thanks. Too much drama. No thanks.
Yeah.
So finally somebody gave me a shot and I rented his house and I said to him, like, look, you can go to my house in Beaumont. I own a house. It's lovely. You can go see it. He goes, no, I trust you. I've got a good vibe. I trust you. And, you know, Danielle, I rented there for a year. Danielle, I don't think she spent 30 nights in that house.
Yeah.
Because she was either on the streets, she was either in treatment and visiting at home on weekends, or she was on the streets. It's where she was. The last time I picked her up twice from that 5-day detox, because I guess I got another peach out another time. And again, then she was downtown hanging around by the public library where a lot of the street youth hang around. And again, I'd just gotten a peach out order. I delivered it to the police at that point. Nothing's happening. And I guess I was downtown that event or another time, and I saw her at the library. I just had coffee with her. If she ever hears this, she's gonna be so angry with me, but I just had coffee with her. And then I saw some beat cops walking, so I walked up to them and I said, I've got a peach out order for my daughter, Danielle Presley. She's over there. Can you go get her, please? Mm-hmm. So again, I handed my kid to the cops again, because the cops, it's just one more kid, and especially an Indigenous kid.
Yeah.
You know? I had the cops bring her home to me one time. She was only 15 years old, and they brought her home, and she was intoxicated. 2:00 in the morning, they brought her home, and the cop said, "Is this yours?" I was shocked. I was heartbroken. And I said, "This is my daughter. This is my daughter, and I love her, and she can't be here because she's not safe from my other kids, but I love her,
Yeah.
And so then they had to take her. Where would you, so can we take her to the youth shelter? Yeah, please take her to the youth shelter. But, is this yours?
So, okay. So what happened next? The beat cops picked her up.
I picked her up and did the 5-day detox again. And then so that must have been it, the 5-day detox. And then I pick her up, and then, they call me and say, they take her there. And then the staff call me to say, well, your daughter's here, and can you come get her Thursday or Friday, whatever it was.
Yeah.
And I said, well, what's the treatment plan? Well, we can't tell you that. It's up to her. And I'm like, so again, like, this is how it goes. Like, all the power. I'm like, part of me, like, who do you think is going to put into place the treatment plan? Like, who do you think is going to make the phone calls? Who do you think is going to drive her there? Who do you think is going to pay for it? Right? Like, it's me. And no, well, we can't tell you unless she wants us to tell you. And I said, okay, well, no problem. Put Danielle on the phone. And she's like, hey, Mom, when you come pick me up on whatever day, can you bring my backpack, and can you bring my shoes, whatever, specific shoes? And I said, no, I'm not coming. She's like, what? I said, I'm not coming. If they're not telling me the treatment plan, if they're not going to tell me, I'm not coming.
Mm-hmm.
And so she's like, well, serious? Because 14-year-olds, they know everything, right?
Oh, of
and
course.
I said, no, I'm not coming.
I'm 40 and I know everything.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So much to your mom's chagrin. So I said, you go over there to your staff and you tell them that Mom can know the treatment plan. Like, I don't have to know all the secrets. I don't have to know what all drugs she's been taking, but at least I have to know what the treatment plan is, right?
Yeah.
So I said, you go over there and you tell them that Mom can know. Okay, Mom. So she goes over, hands them the phone, and they go, yeah, so Danielle says that we can tell you. And I'm like,
Yeah, I know.
I know.
Yeah.
So then they tell me the treatment plan and what she's supposed to do and what we're supposed to do. And I don't even remember what that was because it amounted to nothing. At that point, I was supposed to pick her up, Danielle. This is what it was. I was supposed to pick her up and take her to the youth emergency shelter here in town. That's what she wanted to do. She wanted to go to the youth emergency shelter. And that's what I was tasked to do. So I brought her to the youth emergency shelter, and she goes, I'm not going in. And I said, well, they told me. So I brought her there, Daniel, and I dropped her off, and I got out of the car with her, and she just said, I'm going to go see my friends. And I just watched her walk away over a bridge with a backpack on her back. And it was just like, it was lost. And so she ended up going to I don't know, it's a whirlwind, but she went to residential treatment for 3 months, almost graduated, but at the end she got kicked out because she brought drugs in and was passing drugs around or whatever it was. And so they said, Robbie, you got to come get her.
Yeah.
And just earlier that day, I decided I can't do this anymore. I can't. She's not digging in. She's not doing the work.
Yeah.
And I got other little kids to take care of. And so I told them, they called me to say, you got to come get her because she brought drugs in here.
Yeah.
I said, I'm not coming. And they were gobsmacked. I said, I'm not coming. I said, if you guys can't keep her safe. While she was there with them and she couldn't use her drugs, she started cutting. She cut herself so bad that one night in the middle of the night, I had to come pick her up and take her to the hospital because she cut so bad. That was on her 15th birthday. She started cutting. She started bulimia, so eating and purging, because self-soothing, right? Like there was that deep emotional pain, but she was only 14, almost 15, with so much trauma. She wasn't able to connect with all of that. Like I recognized what was happening, but I also recognized that I couldn't bring her home because my 3 younger kids would be so impressed, like her behavior would be so impressed upon my kids that they would emulate her behavior. And she would be using drugs in the home and doing stuff. And I just, I was putting everybody's life at risk. Yeah. So I said, I'm not coming. And so they said, so you're abandoning your child then? I said, no, if you can't keep her safe.
It kind of sounds like you guys are, really.
Yeah,
So
yeah. If you can't keep her safe, how do I? I'm a single mom with three kids here, but I've got 5 kids and I'm single. You guys
yeah,
have staff, and you guys haven't been able to keep her safe. How am I supposed to do that?
yeah,
So you're abandoning her. I'm like, if that's what you have to tell yourself, then I
yeah,
guess so.
yeah. This is
And
my
then
fault. Yes.
yeah, exactly. And I mean,
Yeah.
I'm doing everything I freaking can do, but I mean, everybody who's walked this road, whether it's their child or themselves or their spouse, once addiction takes root, man, that's it. That's it. It's like the next hit, the next drink, the next escape the pain,
Yeah.
and clear decisions are not being made. And as a family, you're just torn apart. Watching this
Mhm.
happen, and your heart is just being ripped right out of you.
So
The
she
Yeah, go ahead.
she ended up disappearing at some point, and you didn't see her for quite a
She sure
stretch.
did. She sure did. She was in a safe house, like a transition house, just after her 15th birthday. That was just after that. That's when the cops brought her home, drunk. And then that Mother's Day, May, I got a call from her. Hey, Mom, happy Mother's Day. Saw her a couple of times that summer, and then I didn't see her much after that at all.
Yeah.
So I didn't see her when she was 16, 17, 18. She came to my wedding. I got married again when she was about, I think, 17. I got married again. She came to my wedding. Um, and then I didn't see her again. I mean, I'd only see her once in a while like maybe once a year, briefly, if it suited her. And then she'd be gone again.
Yeah.
It's interesting too. Her brothers, she had 3 older brothers. They all grew up in foster care, long-term stable foster care. But they had those early years of in and out, and a lot of trauma. All 3 boys fell into addiction, and 2 of them into homelessness and gang affiliation and stuff too. So, for
Yeah.
those who might be thinking, well, it's because you had an abusive marriage and it's because you got a divorce and, it's all my fault. That certainly didn't help. But, you know, um, there were the factors. There were all those early factors, and not least of which is the prenatal alcohol exposure and those early traumas that happened in her life as well.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that was the story of addiction,
Yeah. And a whole bunch of time goes by, and then she gets arrested and goes away for a year. What was it like when you found that out?
Yeah, I was relieved. And at least I knew where she was, and she was alive. Because the odd time I'd see a beat cop around somewhere, and I'd go, hey, my daughter's Danielle. I'm Robbie, and my kid's on the street, and I don't hear from her. Can you just check and see if she's alive? And I give her name and her birth date, and they'd pull up their Blackberries and they'd punch it all in, and they'd go, oh yeah, the last time we saw her was this date, or yeah, oh yeah, she's in the remand right now, or she's, that kind of thing. So I'd creep her on Facebook, or I'd creep her birth mom on Facebook just to see if
Mhm.
she's alive.
Yeah.
I didn't know if my kid was dead or alive, and the news reports would come on, and, hear this young woman found dead in a dumpster or something. You're like, your blood just turns cold. Like, oh my God, is that mine? And I was so terrified she'd go to BC. I was so terrified that she'd go to Hastings. Thank
Yeah.
God she never did. Thank God one of her brothers did, and they've never heard from him since.
Hmm.
So yeah, she ended up going to jail. She ended up going to jail. She was there for a year, and while she was there, and she was there, and her co-accused were like, she had a bunch of co-accused too, because they were doing B&Es and all kinds of stuff. And but while she was there, she got transferred to Lethbridge, and then she started kicking up trouble in Lethbridge, and she got into some kind of trouble. And so a correctional officer who cared about her, evidently, said to her, like, is this the kind of life you want to lead? Like, is this what you're going to do with your life? Is this the plan, or do you want to change, Danielle? And she goes, no. Like, and then it caught her, and she wanted to change. And the correction officer said, have you heard of Teen Challenge, Adult and Teen Challenge? And Danielle started to cry because her dad, my ex-husband, often talked to her about going to Adult and Teen Challenge. And so and she'd always said, nah, nah, nah. And when this correction officer brought it up, she's like, yeah, I do. I want to go. And as it would happen, or maybe they were there anyway, but somebody from Teen Challenge was there shortly, and had a conversation with Danielle and determined that she'd be suitable for their program, like she was
Mhm.
ready. And it was really interesting. Danielle's release date from jail, I don't know, I think it was like January 22nd, and they had an open bed January 24th. Like, when does
Wow.
that happen? When does that happen?
It
It's
happens.
amazing.
It's interesting, but the people that come on my show that have
Yeah.
found recovery and have found safer means to living, a lot of them say that a bed just came open just by some divine act.
Exactly. It was like a miracle.
Yeah.
Exactly. So my ex-husband picked her up right from jail, and she wanted to have breakfast with me that day and see her siblings. And so we all met for breakfast at a Denny's, and then he took her to Calgary and then off to Abbotsford, so that she wouldn't even have a chance to run or to reconnect with her people here. Like, our plan was just to keep her as safe as possible.
Mm-hmm.
And she was scared, of course. She was scared in a whole new setting. But she learned a lot at Adult Teen Challenge, and she really loved the program. And they raved about her. She dug right in, and she did all the work, and she got healthy. And she really got healthy. And then she wanted to reconnect. And then we did reestablish a relationship. And I was just, first by letters, and then by phone calls. And then we go out to visit her. And I was really surprised and delighted. I was scared. I didn't know what kind of kid, I didn't know if I'd ever get my kid back. And if I did, I didn't know what she would be like. I didn't know. I expected her to be hardened from her experiences. I really expected her to be different and hardened. And she wasn't. Her soul was the same. Her personality and her soul were the same. And it was beautiful. And it was so nice to reconnect with her. And so she did a year of residential treatment there and at Adult Teen Challenge in Abbotsford, BC. And then she stayed on and did their further mentor development program. So that was another year and a half. So she was 2.5 years clean and sober in a structured, supervised environment. And that was really great for her.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when all of this was happening, were you did you build any sort of support network for yourself?
Well, Daniel, while this was happening, in that September when I told you that she had her drink, she came home drunk and then she ran away. And then September 30th, my eldest jumped on a plane and went to Hawaii. And then October 1st, I got a PCHAT order. What I didn't tell you is that that November, so we're talking just 30 days later, that November, the grade 1 teacher called me to say, my kids are failing school. My twins are failing school. And I'm like, wait, what? Like, I already got a fire going on, and now my twins are failing school. And I said, well, let's set them back a grade. Let's give them a good, strong foundation. No, we don't do that. They just need more help at home. And I'm like, I'm like, you don't know the fires I got going on, And I said to them, like, I have homeschooled. I know what needs to be done, but there isn't enough of me to go around. At the same time, my son is 3 years, so they're 6 years old. They're failing school. At the same time, I'm struggling with my 3-year-old. His behaviors are very problematic, and he's very hyperactive. He's sweet, but he's very hyperactive, like nothing you've seen before. And I went to the pediatrician. This is all the same time. And I said, I need some strategies for this boy. And as he's climbing over the exam table and over me and under the chair and all around the room like this little monkey, and the pediatrician who had been caring for him since birth said, no, he needs medication. He has ADHD. So, all at the same time, within 30 days, all of that happened. So there was a lot going on. And once I realized that Danielle was struggling with addiction, my girls are failing school, and my son was having ADHD and was really having problems, then I really reflected on the fact that all 4 of my kids have been prenatally exposed to alcohol. And I started looking for help for that and for, like, what is fetal alcohol spectrum disorder? What is prenatal alcohol exposure, and what does that do to the brain, and what does it do to the body? And that's when I started looking for help. And I started first with the girls, the twins at school, and saying, we need an assessment. Can we please get an assessment for learning disabilities? Again, no, they're too young. We don't do that. And so I let that sit for a weekend or so, and then I went back to them. I'm like, no, you don't understand. Their mother used alcohol when she was pregnant. I am really concerned about fetal alcohol spectrum disorder. Mm-hmm. So then the school came on board with me to look into that. And then I started to dig in for help. And I don't know how I found help, because at first I felt like there was nobody there. When I called my social worker up, when I was sitting outside the courthouse with Danielle and got my first PCHAT order, I called my own social worker up, and all she said to me was, I'm so sorry you're going through that. We got nothing for you. So I started with, we got nothing for you. And then my kids are failing school, and then all this is going on. And somehow I twigged about fetal alcohol spectrum disorder. And then I heard about a program in Edmonton called Catholic Social Services. And they have a program for families raising children prenatally exposed, and it's called Coaching Families. And I could self-refer. I got referred to them, and that gave me a parenting coach. And that's where I really began to learn about FASD. And they gave me books to read, one of the books I have right here in front of me, they gave me a book called Trying Differently Rather Than Harder. Everybody wants this book if they have kids with FASD. So that book, and Strategies, Not Solutions, because what you begin to realize as you begin learning about fetal alcohol spectrum disorder is that this is a brain and body injury. This is a brain and body based disability that has behavioral symptoms. There's no blood test for it. It's all behavioral symptoms with knowing that the birth mother drank alcohol. Yeah. And then I really had to have a transformative idea of like, okay, then if my kids have a disability, then I got to parent differently. And this book, Trying Differently Rather Than Harder, began to show me that, along with my parenting coach, along with the support group. That's what began to turn it around for me.
Awesome. So this was a big turning point for you.
Yeah, it was a big turning point for me.
It already says Prairie Sky. Sorry, we got it.
Yeah.
We'll get that nailed down someday. So
life is crazy. Your show might as well be too.
Oh, it's fun though. Like you get to a point where it's that acceptance, right? There's this chaos going on and it's like, you know what? I'm just going to go along for the ride. It's going to be okay.
It's all fine.
We're carrying a message, and that's what really matters tonight, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so you found some acceptance in this. What was that like? Was that like an aha moment for you? Like, because when we were talking last week, you said you came to this realization that my children are never going to be like other children.
The grief. Like when my kids, there was that. But first of all, there was a diagnosis, and the diagnosis said, one twin, then the next twin, and then 4 years later, my son, all diagnosed with fetal alcohol spectrum disorder. And they will need lifelong supports, and they will have trouble, adulting. They will have trouble in school, and they will have trouble adulting. And I asked them, what will their adolescence look like? Like, how do I prepare? And they said, like, I don't have a crystal ball and look into it, but all I can tell you is it's going to be hard. Well, how do I prepare? What does that mean? So my parenting coach gave me books to read, which really helped to set my expectations differently. And as I began to understand that this was an invisible disability. Like this is like no different than if I lost my right leg because of a car accident. That freaking right leg is never going to grow back. I'm going to have to learn how to deal with this. And I'm going to have adaptations and accommodations so I can access the world, right? I'm going to have a prosthetic. I'm going to have a wheelchair. I'm going to have canes. I'm going to have all sorts of things so I can get around in the world. And that's what I realized. Okay, my kids have an injury. My kids have a physical disability. They have a physical disability of the brain. So yeah, it's invisible because they look typical, but they have a physical permanent disability. That means my kids are disabled. And that's why I was sitting in my car going, my kids are disabled. My kids are disabled. Fuck. My kids are disabled. Like, what is this going to mean? And what it meant was I had to learn a different way of parenting. And what I learned was a brain-based approach to parenting. So that means all those behaviors that are so frustrating, the tantrums, the unable to do this, the unable to do that, the learning disabilities, all these things that go on, the hyperactivity, all of that kind of stuff is all related to the brain injury. So rather than having behaviors that I would consequence or behaviors I would try to change, like you do with a timeout or a consequence or a grounding or whatever, none of that worked because that doesn't work with kids with FASD. They can't learn from that because of the way their brain synapses work and because of their memory challenges and their inability to link cause and effect. So I learned that I had to try to prevent as many behaviors as possible.
So what were some of the things
that I do now? Yeah,
what were some of the things that you started doing differently and what worked and what didn't work that you tried?
Yeah, absolutely. Number one thing that helped initially when the kids were little and still works now is having visual cues to help them get through the day. So as you might have a calendar on your wall or a daytime or whatever, I had to have calendars or schedules. And so the morning routine, so we get up. And so it had to be a little picture diagram of what happens and in the right order. And it was important to have it nailed down. This is the order we want it to go in and do the same thing in the same way every single day. And it took 6 freaking years for that to log in, to become internalized, for my kids to be able to do it themselves. 6 years of a visual with verbal support, but less verbal support than what you would want to give because the auditory is overstimulating to them. So one thing that worked was, like I said, having a visual. So it was like we get up, then we have breakfast, then we have meds, and then we get dressed. But then we had to have another visual cue in their bedroom. To get dressed is too vague. Kids with FASD have a very concrete way of thinking, and they can only handle one step at a time. Even adults with FASD, this is true, one step at a time. So then I'd have another little chart in their bedroom that would show that, first of all, you take off your pajamas and they go in the laundry, and then you put on your underwear, and then you put on your pants, then you put on your shirt, then you put on your socks, whatever order you're going to do it. But you don't let it be scrambled, because they might forget to put on their underwear, or they might forget to put on their socks, or they might, So I had visuals. I also had the clothes laid out for them so that there was just they didn't have to have that other choice,
Yeah.
The other thing that was really problematic for my twins particularly was fabrics were very irritating for them. So to put on socks, we could have a 30-minute cry fest, temper tantrum about socks because they're too buggy. And that was your typical.
Some socks worked and some socks didn't work? Or was it just socks in general?
Socks don't work. Socks don't work. Socks with seams, socks don't work. So they couldn't be like fuzzy. They couldn't be like fuzzy sports socks. They couldn't be scratchy. There couldn't be a seam across the toe. What some mom, and I learn a lot from other moms, so some mom told me is turn the socks inside out. Genius. Turn the socks inside out, and then the seams don't hurt.
It's golden.
Also, golden. Jeans. Can't wear jeans. Can't wear jeans. Can't wear jeans. Can't have a scratch. Can't have a tag in a shirt. Can't have any seams that bug. So like you buy a brand new cute little outfit, try it on. Nope, too muggy, too muggy, too muggy. And I mean, you got to freak out. And this is 6 years old. This is 6, 7, 8 years old, but this is 2-year-old behavior. And that's what happens with our kids. Our kids are less mature by half, usually. Less mature by half. And then when they're stressed out, they can't handle something, they drop another half. So I've got a 6 who's functioning at a 3, but now she's tantruming like she's, a year or 2.
Yeah.
And that just goes on and on. And so now I have 16-year-olds who are, developmentally maybe more like 8 or 9 years old, unless they're stressed. And then they tantrum and freak out like they're 3. And you can't reason with a 3-year-old. All you can do is comfort a 3-year-old.
Yeah.
And you talk about it later, if you talk about it at all. And they're 16 years old. They're as tall as me. They look neurotypical. So it's really complicated. Really complicated. And this goes on. Some of my friends who are watching this, they have kids my kids' age and older, and they can relate to this too. What happens after you're done high school, and you don't fit in this world anymore, and you look like a 19-year-old, but developmentally you're 10 years old. Where are you going to fit in the world, right? And so a lot of our kids too, because of that prenatal alcohol exposure, are susceptible to being addicted themselves, right? Because their whole cell structure has been bathed in alcohol, depending on how much mom has used. But the alcohol crosses the placental barrier. So it's called a teratogen. Teratogen means it causes birth defects. So if you can believe this, drinking alcohol is harder on a baby than smoking crack. And smoking crack's not easy on a baby by any stretch of the imagination. But drinking alcohol, even moderately drinking alcohol, crosses right into the placental barrier, right into the fetus. And fetus doesn't have a liver. So these cells are being destroyed. These cells are being killed, being realigned. The axons in the brain are not being myelinated. And so you've got all kinds of brain damage happening. Yeah. And brain and damage to the central nervous system and all those systems of sucking and swallowing and breathing and digestion. And it's just so complicated, and it manifests itself sometimes in medical crises, early aging, many onsets of diseases. There's like 400 diseases and conditions that are exponentially higher causality, not causality, but comorbidity with people who have FASD, because their whole system is not created. It's compromised from that prenatal alcohol exposure.
Yeah, we've got. I lost my train of thought now. So before we go any further, let's just, if you guys have any comments or questions or anything, we're about to go into the viewer's voice here in about the next probably 5 minutes or so. So get your comments in the chat now. We'll do our best to get to everybody. I don't think we're on a real time limit here. So, but something that we didn't talk about, and I want to make sure we talk about it, is you sneaking in to FASD conferences. I want to talk about that. Let's hear about that.
That's a badass move, right?
Just fuck it. Yeah. Let's go. Yeah.
Fuck it. Let's go. Exactly. Because what was happening is I found out about these FASD conferences, training gigs and stuff like, so there's this training that's happening. One is like $300. And I'm like, I can't freaking like single mom of 5. How am I going to pay to go to a $300 training for, 8 hours or a conference? There was an FASD conference that was being promoted, and all these staff from all over the city and all over Alberta are going to this conference, and it's $400 to go to a conference. And I'm thinking, as you said, fuck it. They don't pay for that out of their grocery money. Why should I? And I just went. To the conference. I dressed up like I own the show.
Yeah. I'd let you in. I'd let you in straight up.
I went like this, right? I had lipstick on, let's go for it.
Yeah.
And I walked in and they offered me the swag bag, and I'm like, thank you very much. I took the swag bag, put on the label, and I was there for the conference. Yeah. And I freaking learned so much,
Yeah.
And there was another conference that I attended. This one I got a grant for. There was because I'm like, my name was in the attendance book. So how did I get to that one? But I think I must have applied for a grant to go to that one or bursary or something. But in 2013, it was the first ever international FASD conference. And my name's in that book. I attended that conference and I learned so much. And who I learned so much from was the researchers, because they put all the numbers, they're doing all the analysis and all the statistics. But who I learned so much from was the parents with the lived experience. And they're the ones who can tell you this shit is real. And they can tell you how it goes down in their families and what works and what doesn't, and how to advocate with teachers and how to advocate on sports teams and all this kind of stuff. And that's what I needed to know. Like, how do I do this? And, I was always desperate. When I was in a support group or my kids were in programs, I was always looking around for where's a friend? I need a friend who's living this life, a friend who's got a couple of years on me who I could learn from. No one. I never had anybody. So that's why I started my podcast. Ultimately, I started some support groups at church. I did some education at church. I did some education at school and tried to do some support groups. And I'm really transparent. I talk about FASD. I talk about our journey because I think it's really important to bring awareness. Daniel, you just appeared.
Hang on. Yeah, no, I'm still here. Hang on. We're gonna have to switch cameras here. My battery for some reason died on my camera. Give us 1 minute.
No worries.
Can you switch to this one?
Life's fun, eh?
Oh man, I don't know why that died. Yeah, not sure. Give me just 2 more seconds here.
I got time.
Okay. Okay.
Daniel, this is just like FASD life, man. When if anything can go wrong, it will go wrong.
I think
and that's how it is.
My camera's
That's how it is, and so I just roll with it. It doesn't matter.
Yeah. So okay. So tell us a little bit about what it's like now for you. What are the things that you have using regularly, and also what are some things that haven't worked for you in the past that you've tried?
Okay. Yeah. Okay. The question is, what is working? Structure, routine, close supervision, prevention. So those spaces that I know are hard for my kids, transitions between one activity and another activity, all 3 kids being in close proximity to each other at home or out or in the vehicle, does not work. The fireworks are going to fly because kids with individuals, not just kids, individuals with FASD are very sensitive. Some are very, very sensitive to external stimuli, so that would be called a sensory processing disorder. So the world, life is too loud, too bright, too itchy, too scratchy, too smelly. That's my twins. And then my little guy, he's 13, and he is hyposensitive, which means he's not as stimulated by all these things. So he's constantly making noise, banging into things, tapping and drumming and irritating the shit out of them. So we are always having to juggle these balls and keep things structured, keep things predictable so that my kids can stay centered and know what life is coming at them. So we have to practice a lot of structure, a lot of routine, a lot of eyes on. Even when they go to bed at night, I was late coming here because I had to be close to where my son was going to bed because he can't be left unsupervised because he's going to be agitating the girls. So that's what it's like. Like it's high stress every day. And there's always somebody going to be kicking off every day. Supper times are really hard because by then the kids are tired. Brain fatigue is a real thing for people with FASD. They often don't sleep well. And even if they do sleep well, their brains, because they are not wired correctly, their brains have to work so very hard to accomplish anything, or just to think, just to speak, just to reason and to remember. The brains have to work so hard that by 4 o'clock they're exhausted. And so supper time, 5 or 6 o'clock comes around, they're exhausted, and now they're supposed to be on the same room together eating. It's really hard. So we have to have structure in place there too. And so everybody always eats at the same place at the table with significant space between each other. And oftentimes we have to have one kid sitting in an entirely different room from each other. Man, your background changed.
Yeah, no, we're on the backup camera now. So this is okay. So
hey, life is real, man.
You know what? You know what? I'm grateful for. We have a fucking backup camera.
I'm glad you have a backup camera, and and I have backup strategies that I have collected from other parents over the years. Here's a golden one. I never learned in any training, but I learned from a parent in a support group, and this is golden. Separate for success. It's a lot different than divide and conquer. That's a different spirit, but it's separate for success. And what that means, I've got multiples with FASD, keep them apart from each other, especially in high stress situations. So that means in the morning routine, when all 3 kids have to get up and get ready for school, everybody has the same departure time. We have to do staggered entries into the kitchen. So not all 3 kids are in the kitchen at the same time having breakfast. No way. We have to stagger it. So, the twins may or may not, but they stagger what time they get up now. But when they were younger, I'd have to organize. Remember that daily routine chart I talked about who gets up and who does what when? I had to jiggle that a little bit to make sure that my twins they could be in the kitchen before 7 o'clock in the morning. And this is still the rule. They have to be out by 7 o'clock in the morning. That's when Ben goes in. And if you don't want to be irritated, out you go. So they have to be out. So then it's Ben's turn, and that's separate for success. And then I have to be there with Ben. He's 13 years old, but he can't regulate himself. And so that means talking, banging, angry, throwing things around. Like when he was little, it was soccer, hockey, and football all at the same and basketball all at the same time, first thing in the morning. And mom was his catcher and his goalie and his defender and everything else. I was his playmate while making breakfast. Now I'm still the referee while I'm making breakfast for him, because though he's got the physical capacity to, let's say, make his own breakfast, he doesn't have the mental capacity to do it in the morning. So I have to do it for him. And meanwhile, I have to be giving him his meds and let him be watching TV so he can be centered and focused while that happens. And it's going to be a good hour until his meds are on board so that he can be a little bit more regulated. And that's all from prenatal alcohol exposure. Okay. And that's what I wanted to, let's talk about that, because that's what I wanted to talk about with you today too.
Okay. Go for it.
Thanks. What I wanted to say is no shame, no blame. Like, I'm an adoptive mom, and my kids have birth moms, and I love their birth moms, and no shame, no blame. We all understand that an FASD diagnosis is not about shaming birth mom. This is a diagnosis for 2, because we know birth mom didn't know she was hurting her baby. She probably didn't even know she was pregnant when she was drinking. Like I said, my first and only pregnancy was an unplanned surprise pregnancy. Right? So, and I wasn't drinking alcohol. I was abstinent from alcohol at that time in my life. So, but if I had been drinking alcohol, I would have continued drinking in my normal pattern because I didn't know I was pregnant. 60% of pregnancies are unplanned. 80% of women drink alcohol. Let's do the math. So that's what I want to talk with you guys about today, is just like the risk is real. And it's not that every woman who drinks alcohol will have a child with FASD, but every woman who drinks alcohol while she's pregnant does expose her baby to alcohol, and alcohol does damage cells. And so there will be loss of potential. There will be an ADHD. There will be learning disabilities. There will be behavioral challenges if this child's exposed to alcohol. So that's what I wanted to get the message of, and not to judge. That's not what it's about. It's about, if you know, then stop. If you can't stop, please get help. If you can't stop and you get help, please please like admit that you're drinking alcohol, so then that your baby, not that your baby's taken away, but that you can get interventions afterward too, to support your sobriety and support your baby. And then you can have some specialized parenting. Like I had to learn specialized parenting. You can get some specialized parenting. And you know what, this is really important for dads too. The onus can't all be on moms, because we know that a woman whose partner drinks alcohol is going to be more likely that she's going to drink alcohol too, right? Or if her partner's using drugs and alcohol, she's more likely to be using drugs and alcohol too during her pregnancy. So partners, husbands, boyfriends, friends and family, we all need to get behind mom. If mom's pregnant, then we all need to do a dry 9 for baby's health and mom's health. And that's what I wanted to talk about today, is just that awareness, because it's really high. It's a conservative estimate says that 5% of people in Canada or in the States have fetal alcohol spectrum disorder. You have to have a pretty high bar of disability to qualify for an FASD. So there's many higher percentage of people that are touched by prenatal alcohol exposure but don't qualify for that diagnosis. And then among children who are in foster care or adoption, exponentially higher rate of FASD. Some estimates say about 11% of people that are in foster care or adoption have FASD. And that's important. And then if I think about the people I've talked to in the addiction community, how many people in addiction have started from foster care or adoption, or have a family history of addiction? Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And so the rate of people who are in addiction themselves, they already have the genetic tendency toward addiction. They have those dysfunctional patterns in their families of origin. And I'm not casting any aspersions. I'm not casting any judgment. We just know alcohol and drugs destroy people, and they destroy families.
Yeah.
And so, so if your parent is in addiction and then you become an addiction and then you have kids, what do you bring to the table in terms of your parenting? All you know is what you've learned. That's all of us have. All of us have what we've learned. And so, if it hasn't been great, if it wasn't great for you, then you're bringing that forward to your kid, right?
Yeah.
And so I want to say, hey guys, we could do this differently. And if I can help you learn about fetal alcohol spectrum disorder, if I can help you learn strategies that work, and about accommodating and about preventing and about understanding that these behaviors, these really problematic behaviors that just can't change no matter what you try, probably a brain-based, let's talk about that. And that's what I want to talk about with your community. It's not about any judgment. It's about, hey, let's partner together so that everybody has better outcomes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And kids with fetal alcohol spectrum disorder, kids who have neurobehavioral challenges, like these are the kids who act out. These are the kids that are also disproportionately higher rate of being abused and neglected, because they're freaking hard to take care of. They are really hard to take care of. And so if you're already struggling, let's say with your sobriety, and then you've got a kid that's really hard to take care of, man, it's going to drive you to drink.
Yeah.
Or it's going to drive you to lose your mind.
I mean, parenting on a good day is a challenge. It's
yeah. It just is hard. Like, it's one of the hardest things you're ever going to do. And if you're parenting a child who has challenges, a child who is half their age in maturity. So, you're expecting your son to maybe act like an 8-year-old, but he can do really good as a 3-year-old or 4-year-old. Like, his behaviors are right on target for 3 or 4, but he's 8 and you're expecting him to be 8. Then constantly you're frustrated and he's frustrated because he can't reach your expectations, right? So then your frustration goes up. And if you have a kid with FASD, they are the barometer. They can't regulate themselves, but man, they'll escalate with you. So if you're up, they're up. And if they're hot, if they're already up and you come at them hot, you just got an explosion. Yeah. So kids with FASD, kids that have these neurobehavioral challenges, their cortisol is revving high, their brains are wired differently, they're ready to explode all the freaking time. And so you got to come at them calm, level, ready to go, hey buddy, you're not in trouble, I'm here on your side, I'm on your side. And they get them to calm down. As they calm down, their thinking brain can come online, and then you can do some talking. But if you come at them like, why would you do that? You don't know, you know better. Boom. And then it just gets worse and worse and worse. I mean, we all do that. We all have to learn a different way. Like, man, I didn't know this stuff when I was 22 in parenting. I didn't know this when I was 30 in parenting.
Yeah.
Like I got really good at this after into my 40s when I had to dig in with my kids who were, I had one in addiction, 2 failing, and one like run around like a squirrel around a lamppost. Like, it was nuts in my house.
when I released one of your advertisements the other day, and it said that the biggest challenge is not controlling my child. My biggest challenge as a parent is controlling myself, controlling my emotions, and it's tough. I get it. I get it. My kid's got some big behavior. Like it's out of control. And if, as a person in recovery, when you're saying, that can drive a person to drink, well, I haven't gotten that far yet, but I think I just really, I hate drinking. So,
well, whatever your choice is, but and there's this whole mommy wine culture out there too, right? Like it started as kind of some funny memes, but it's like freaking serious.
Yeah.
It's freaking serious. And if your kids, like, first of all, if that's your coping, this is water, my friends. But, if that's your coping is that glass,
this is also
there
water.
There are days when it's going to be 10 o'clock in the morning and you're like, I'm going to fucking need a drink.
Yeah.
Because this is like, parenting is intense, but in parenting children with a brain disability that you don't know about, and lots of people don't know about FASD. So parenting a child with a brain disability that's got really intense behaviors and really intense emotions, and they blow fits that can last. Like I have a kid who can blow a fit for 2 hours, like scream and scream and scream and scream for 2 hours.
Wow.
Like, what do you do with that? Or a kid who runs away and you're like, where did you go? Or, like just all kinds of stuff happens. They steal. Kids with FASD take things that don't belong to them. They tell things that aren't true, oftentimes because they can't freaking remember, but it sounds like lies. And when you call it stealing and lying, you're moralizing the behavior. And that's what we all typically do. But our kids, they do that all the time because it's a brain injury. Yeah. So when we can take that lens off, we take the moral lens off of it. Remember, church girl, that's hard to do. Man, you grow up with right is right and wrong is wrong. Yeah. That's hard to do.
I'm just gonna pray about it. It's like super hard.
No, like you're sinning. We got the priest in here. No, like it doesn't work.
The power of Christ.
Like it doesn't work, man. Like I had it. Like that's another whole show.
Yeah.
It's like, if your kid had Down syndrome or you're praying for healing, like, no, you're like, would somebody make me a casserole? Because life is fucking hard. Like my kids I have 4 kids with a brain injury, one with an addiction or one's with a substance use challenge, who's now again in treatment. Thank God. She just had a baby and she's again in treatment. So thank God for her. I'm so proud of her. She's in treatment. She's got her little one. She wants to do right for him. I'm so proud of her. Is that the dream of adoption? Is this the dream of adoption? And a lot of adoptive families struggle with, they love their kids. They wanted to build a family through adoption. And then at least 11% of kids in adoption and foster care have FASD. And I tell you, all my friends who are adoptive parents all said, no, I don't want to raise kids with FASD because I don't think I've got the skills for it. All of them have kids with FASD. And so they've all had to, pull up their big girl panties and get on with it. And it's hard. It's really hard. And so, let's do it. Let's have some questions.
Yeah, we got to go into the viewer's voice. I'm sure we could go on all night, but here we go. Here we go. Viewer's voice. Okay, so first I want to bring up Natalie's comment. Yes. And that's it. Yes! So everything!
My friend Natalie Vecchione is an adoptive parent, and one of her kids has FASD, and she's living the fucking dream. It's hard. It's hard.
Yeah.
And she went to homeschooling because she couldn't get any supports in school. So they homeschooled. They had to move out of their community, move to a rural community to get that kid the supports and the family the supports they need. And it's hard and it's lonely. Nobody gets it.
Yeah.
And so she has a podcast. Natalie has a great podcast called FASD Hope.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
We will put both of your podcast links to your podcast and to Natalie's podcast on the Hard Knocks page tomorrow, because we're done with today. After the show's done, we're done for today. So we got another.
And there's so many days I'm done with today, and I go to bed at 8:00. Like I'm just done with today. Anyway,
we've got
questions.
Well, we've got some comments more than anything. We've got Farva here. I hope I said that right. Just threw another one. Yeah. Okay. Thanks for the comment, Farva. He says, my son has ADHD and has the same issues with clothing on tags. We've got We've got another one here from Bonita. Bonita, thanks for the comment. She just wants to say that you are an amazing woman, Robbie, a strong woman.
Thanks, Bonita.
We've got Farva again. And Farva says, these things are quite similar to autism and autism spectrum. Is there any organization taking care of kids with FASD? That's a good question.
Are there any organizations taking care of kids with FASD? Not to my knowledge. It falls on the parents, and it takes a big, strong tribe of parents. Now, there are some really great research. There are a few organizations scattered here and there that can help parents, but it comes to the parents. And unless your child has an intellectual disability, so now I'm talking about an older child or an adult child who has an intellectual disability. Most people with FASD do not have an intellectual disability, therefore do not qualify for services. That means they don't qualify to live in group homes. That means they don't qualify to live in institutional care, even though they need structure, routine, support, and supervision their whole life. So that means me.
We've got Claudia chiming in. More comments than questions tonight. Everybody, I think you've answered all of the questions. You've been very informative. But Claudia would just like to say, great message on dropping the shame.
Drop the shame, man. Drop the shame. I don't want any shame about using drugs or alcohol to cope, because, man, life is hard. I get it. Hard. Life is really hard. And yeah, and then if that's in your family and you've got deep, deep wounds, you want to, I get it. That's not what it's about.
We've got
drop
Barb.
The stigma.
Yes, we've got Barb chiming in. Barb says, love the message. It takes a community and practical skills to address these challenges. Thank you so much for sharing this understanding.
Absolutely.
Yes, and we've got, and I'm sorry, I forgot your name. It's the person from MDC.
Okay, yeah.
What was it? No. Aline? What was it?
It's Aileen. It's Aileen.
Okay.
Yeah. And the picture there, that's her husband. Her husband.
Very confusing.
Aileen.
This is.
I know.
So Aileen says, my son has behavioral challenges and is almost 15 and is very frustrating. Lots of explosions on his part. My hubby and I have to stay ... Oh, there's another one. No, I think there might be a limit on the characters. Yeah.
Yeah, not the dream. We have to change our dreams. Absolutely. You know, for those of us in Canada, I'm gonna throw you back to a tire commercial. Fountain Tire. Okay, remember Fountain Tire commercial? And they used to always have that really dry-witted bald guy who was on that tire commercial. Anyway, there's this one time, do you remember? There's one time he's on the airplane and he's sitting in the middle seat and he's like, we're going to Hawaii. And there's these two guys on sitting on the other side of him, and they got their laptops and like tick, 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 tick. And so he's like, yeah, we're going to Hawaii. It's going to be such a great time. And then they cut out to a Fountain Tire ad, and then they cut back and they look at him and he cuts back. He goes, so Gate 41A was Hawaii. Gate 41B was Winnipeg. We're going to Winnipeg.
Yeah.
And that's kind of it, man. Like, you might have fun in Winnipeg, but it's not Hawaii.
Parenting an FASD child is like going to Winnipeg.
It's going to Regina. It's going to Regina. That's what it is.
Oh, no, you did not. I agree. Well,
sorry.
But there are some nice things in Regina.
I'm from Winnipeg.
So what else do we got here? We've got
silence.
Yeah.
Yeah, you have to change your dream, and that's fair. Like, you can't, there's no point. How do we keep our sanity?
Eileen wants to say, how do we keep our sanity? Yeah.
We keep our sanity by learning about what is this brain-based challenge. And even if it isn't FASD, if there's prenatal alcohol exposure, but there isn't that, maybe the clinical diagnosis of FASD, we can still implement brain-based parenting. Like this Trying Differently Rather Than Harder book I mentioned earlier. It's for fetal alcohol spectrum disorders, but also neurobehavioral challenges. And it really talks about taking a brain-based approach to it. So, which means trying to prevent those explosions, trying to see like what is happening for my kid, like what's getting in the way, why isn't this working? And I mean, I know it's hard too, because our kids ignite like that. They ignite so fast. So it's afterwards, sometimes you have to do some reflection and some thinking about, okay, like what happened there? What does he need differently? Like, so if, let's say the kid's out in the community and he's setting off, he's getting frustrated, he's getting angry, and he's getting in fights, then maybe the kid doesn't go in the community without supervision. That's hard on parents. How do you do that? Like, how do you do that? Or can I, rather than having my kid home all summertime, can I put my camp in some kind of, my child in some kind of structured program? And that's really hard when they get to be teenagers, because the government doesn't want to fund any programs for kids over 12 years old. But our kids are like 15, but they're 8. My son is 13, but he's 6. He still needs structured programs because, what do they say? Idle hands are the devil's playground. Like, kids anybody can get into trouble if they don't have structure, routine, and a purpose. So, and the other thing for Aileen and me, we need our friends who get it, because our families love us, but our families don't really get it. We need other moms and dads who are living this dream, so we can laugh with each other and encourage each other and share the little tips that we learn from each other.
Yeah. Yeah, and you got to have a sense of humor. Like, like we're sitting here joking around and laughing, oh, FASD is like going to Winnipeg, but it might be like going to visit someone really fun in Winnipeg,
Some days.
Yeah.
Some days.
Yeah.
It's still Winnipeg.
Yeah, so we got Claudia chiming in here. She is giving us some information about an FASD network in Saskatchewan.
Yeah,
she goes on to
amazing.
say she goes on to say there is offices in Regina and Saskatoon. Robbie, what can you tell us about that?
I can tell you that the FASD network in Saskatchewan is amazing. You can go to their website and check out, I think it's Sask FASD network, something like that. Go check it out. They have such fantastic resources. They do great training, and they have all these really cute printables or takeaways that you can learn. And they even have an FASD parent tip guide. It's called Tips. And it's amazing. And it'll take one behavior and have a whole sheet of tips. It's brilliant. They do a great job in Saskatchewan. Yeah. Winnipeg, I was shaming Winnipeg. I'm from Winnipeg. So before you hate on me, I was born there, and my extended family all lives there. So don't get mad at me. But you know what? There's some really cool stuff happening in Winnipeg too. They have some really neat, they've got a really fantastic parent handbook produced by the FASD network in Winnipeg. They've got some really great interventions that they're doing in some of the schools in Winnipeg. So you got to dig in, like, you really have to dig into the internet and see what you can find for resources. And with COVID, some things have become more available to us in terms of online training and stuff. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah. No, sorry. I was just going to go on. We've got, I hope I say your name right. We've got Townie. He's just laughing because we're fun.
Hey, Tawny.
Oh, do you know this person?
No.
No.
But hey, what's up, Tawny? Do you have a question?
Yeah, no,
Laughing.
she's just laughing at us, and then so is Barb. Barb is like,
life's hard, man, so they're laughing at us.
Yeah, ha ha ha. We can all agree about Regina. Barb, don't be like that.
I'm in so much trouble.
Yeah, not from Barb, apparently.
Great place to drive through on your way to Winnipeg. That's all I know.
Okay, we've got Claudia coming with a question.
Yeah.
Any advice for people working with FASD adults in treatment or counseling?
Recognize that they sound a lot better than they are. Like verbally, they sound a lot better than they are, but they still have the primary disability of dysmaturity, which means that they are going to have a scattered sense of maturity and capacity across their lifespan. So while you might be working with somebody who is 30 years old, okay, actually, I'm going to dial this back a second. You're going to be working with somebody who's 20 to 25 years old. They are still in their adolescence developmentally. And I know this from the literature. I also know this from talking with adults who have FASD, that the adults who I've spoken to with FASD consider their 20 to 30 adolescents. Let that just sink in. Let that blow your mind. So what do you expect of a 24-year-old? What do you expect of a 25-year-old? You expect a hell of a lot of capacity of self-governance, monitoring your behavior, some self-reflection, taking some responsibility, being on time for a job. Guess what? You've got FASD. You're developmentally maybe 12 years old. You don't have it. You cannot live up to the treatment, all those treatment protocols or the court protocols if you've gone that way, or counseling. You can't live up to it because developmentally you're not there. Also, people with FASD have working memory challenges, also a primary characteristic, which means it's just inherently part of that disability. It's caused by the prenatal exposure. So it is what it is, and it ain't going to change. There can be some growth. But it's fundamentally, it's there. So people who work with individuals in treatment or in counseling, and they're like, these people never show up. They're always late. Yeah, because you said 2:00, your appointment's at 2:00. They cannot, so many times people with FASD cannot do the mental gymnastics to go, okay, I have to be there at 2:00. That means I have to get up at such and such a time. I have to have a shower. I have to eat. I have to plan my bus route. And so many people with FASD don't drive. They can't drive.
I suck at that stuff too.
Yeah. But if you actually have a brain injury and you can't do it, and then and then you get disqualified out of treatment, or you get disqualified out of counseling because you're always late.
Then you're alone in the world.
You're alone in the world. So what if your counselor called you up? Like, let's say you're not there and they didn't shame you. They just called you up and it's 2:00 and you answer and you go, hey, Daniel, it's 2:00. It's time for our appointment. And you're like, let's do it now on the phone. Let's do FaceTime. And you'd be like, okay, shit. Yeah, let's do it. Instead of you missed your appointment, I'm dropping you as a client.
Right.
We have to change. It's those of us who are serving our clients with FASD. We're the ones who have to come up with the adaptations, and we're the ones who have to make it work. Because this person has a brain injury.
That is fantastic.
Would you,
Preach it. Yeah.
Would you expect,
absolutely.
Grandma has dementia. Are you going to get mad at grandma for forgetting at supper time? Or are you just going to go, hey, grandma, let's go to supper? Yeah. That's what we have to do with our people with FASD. Not that they have dementia, but they have a brain injury. And if it doesn't, and yet, here's the most confounding thing. One day it'll work. One day everything's clicking, and their brain is like, it's the Yellowhead Highway, and you're just flying. You got good weather. You got no headwinds. You don't have blazing snow across. The brain is working. The very next day, later that day even, now you're on a secondary road and it's a snowstorm and it's all packed in and the brain is not connecting. The neurons are not firing. That's an FASD brain. Mm-hmm. That's an FASD brain. Sometimes it works, sometimes it don't. And the person on the outside looks the same. Yeah. So the solutions have to reside with us. The solutions are with the parents. The solutions are with the counselors. The solutions are with the caregivers. They're not with the people with FASD. Unless they're capable, but they can offer like what works for you, what doesn't work for you, right? Like Daniel, you can say, man, I can't do those mental gymnastics either. Okay, cool. Can you think about what could help? And you'd probably go, yeah, man, if I set some alarms for myself. Mm-hmm. Okay, cool. Let's do that. But then a person with FASD may not have the capacity to initiate. They might come up with it, but they may not then know how to. Again, so many mental steps. So if we go like, hey, dude, hand me your phone. Let's set up some alarms for you. And like, boom, boom, boom. How do you want to label them? What works for you? Let's label them. Bang, it's there. Put it on, get an iWatch. And the kids can, the adults can go, oh yeah, 12:00. Shit, I got to catch my bus because I got counseling. Let's go. And things can happen, but we have to put the steps in place. We have to set people up for success.
Amazing. Okay,
I think the passion. Can you hear?
I can hear it. No, I love it, and I wish we could go all night, but I think we better put a cap on it. The comments. Oh,
there's no cap.
The comments seem to have died off. But I would like to ask you: is there any words of wisdom or hope or experience that you would like to leave us with tonight?
Absolutely. You know what? The struggle is real, you guys. I know it. As a mom of 4 with FASD and working with kids with FASD, the struggle is real, but so is success. The success resides with us. So we've got to deal with the guilt, deal with the shame, deal with the burdens and the grief that we have. And then we have to dig into the research and get to know other moms, other parents, other caregivers, and find out the resources in our communities. And we got to get after it. That's all you got to do. You got to get after it. And I'm here for you. Check me out on FASD Family Life. Check me out on Facebook. Message me. I'm here for you.
Okay, Robbie. Thank you, my friend.
Absolutely.
Appreciate
Great
you
episode.
coming
Thank
tonight.
you so much.
Yeah. Okay. Take care.
All the best. Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Call to action. All right. Okay, fostering change is our primary purpose here at Hard Knocks Talks. If you would like to contribute to ending the stigma around emotional pain, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. Follow us on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram. Let us come together with our lived and living experience as a resource that has the power to engage new thought processes, to promote new ideas, to broaden the spectrum of care, and to show the world that the lie is dead, we do recover, and we're here to show you how. Good night.